Hello, everybody. It's Evan Grant, Dallas Morning News, dallasnews.com, Rangers Insider. Going to start calling this thing the American Stream. I like it. It's Rangers Talk, Friday afternoon, as the Rangers get ready to start a week-long road trip to Detroit and the New York Yankees. Before we get into questions, we'll go through the regular disclaimers, if that's okay with you guys. First, if you can, please like and subscribe to this channel. I'd really like to get to 2,000 followers here. We're very close, or 2,000 subscribers. Secondly, you can always find my work at the Dallas Morning News and at dallasnews.com, and you can find me at Evan_P_Grant on Twitter, X, or Evan P. Grant at Blue Sky. Before we get started, also, I expect that by the time this is finalized today, by the time we leave, hopefully we'll have some better news about Wyatt Langford's situation. I reported earlier today that he left an unofficial rehab game in Arizona. Since this, I believe, extended spring training has ended, it was almost a camp game type atmosphere. So it's not an official rehab. Took one at bat last night and then left. Apparently still feeling some residual pain in his forearm. Now, whether that means it's a significant setback or just a couple of days, I think that's what we'll get a better feel for this afternoon. And if I get that from Sean McFarland, who's in Detroit at this very moment, I will pass that along. Sean's on the ground there. I, of course, am going to New York because I'm bigfooting him on that trip, but that's just the way it works when you're a veteran like I am. Sorry, Sean. You do great work. April is over. I think that if you read my column on Thursday morning or after the game on Wednesday, I think you got my takeaways from April, but let's just run through this real quick. I had the Rangers in my season's predictions, schedule month-by-month analysis. I had them going 16-15 through the end of April. They're 15-16, and the way I look at it is they're a one-run loss to the A's at home that was full of some late opportunities away from being right on track with where they should be record-wise. But what I think is more important is, to me, there are two developments, and we can talk about the lack of offense all year long, because I think it's going to be a story. I think it's going to be a story in Global Life Field. We can get into some stats in a little bit, but I think there were two developments that were of real significance in April. One was that we saw Josh Young play the best baseball of his career. This last month has been the best baseball he has ever played for a 30-game stretch. He's looked like the player and better that he was in the first half of 2023 when he was an American League All-Star. And so that's a big step. And one thing I really like is I think over these last 25 games, I think he's right at 1-to-1 in walk to strikeout ratio. So that's great for him. This is a guy who chased too much and a guy who didn't walk a ton. And so if he's made that adjustment and able to, the way I tried to explain it to somebody yesterday is I think that there have been some minor changes in his setup and approach that have allowed him to see the ball a millisecond longer before starting his swing. And because of it, it's allowed him better pitch recognition. I also think that he's not trying to do too much at the plate. And we're seeing him drive the ball into the gaps. A lot of doubles. Globe Life Field is a park that you may have to be satisfied with doubles and not home runs. And he's not trying to hit home runs. He's simply trying to hit the ball hard to the big part of the field. And that's what this offense needs to do to be successful at home. The second element for me that was really significant in April was going into the season, we had a whole lot of questions about this bullpen. I did not have on my bingo card the Rangers bullpen having the best relief ERA in Major League Baseball. And listen, relief ERA can be skewed a little bit one way or another because maybe you don't get charged for the inherited runners, but you still allow runs to score. But what I think does matter is the fact that Jake Latz has, for all intents and purposes, become the closer. And I think Skip Schumacher was very close to saying that on Wednesday after the game when he said that Jake was his ninth inning guy, depending on the lane, and that's his qualifier, and means that, you know, if he's facing if it was a strong string of right-handed hitters, maybe Jacob Junis is the guy in that situation. But in that string of hitters that he faced in a 2-inning save on Wednesday against the New York Yankees was Aaron Judge, and he got Aaron Judge out. And you're not going to face a better right-handed hitter than Aaron Judge. So I do think that that was a real turning point in the evolution of Jake Latz, and his month has been spectacular. A spot start, you know, a 2-inning save, ninth inning outings, lots of high leverage games. He was a really valuable piece, and I think the linchpin in that bullpen. Also in the bullpen, I think the production of surprises, and you need to have surprises in your bullpen. You've just got to have guys who come from out of nowhere and really hit a hot streak. And I think the Rangers have had that, at least the beginning of one, with 9 1/3 combined scoreless innings from Gavin Collier, who's got closer type stuff at 100 miles an hour, and Peyton Gray, doesn't have powerful stuff, but he's got a big league changeup, and he's using that to his advantage. And so the fact that those two guys have really stepped in has been, I think, a significant development. So my takeaway from April is that this team is pretty much on target for where they need to be. I do think that the Globe Life Field has gotten in these hitters' heads a little bit, and I think that is a concern. I wrote a story the other day about the chase rate at home versus the chase rate on the road, and that to me was the biggest indicator of any of this, that there's an issue there. That basically said to me that the Rangers are trying to do too much. They're chasing way too much at home versus on the road. You know, ballpark's not making you swing, right? The flight of the ball is not making you swing, but it may be putting thoughts in your head that you got to try and do a little bit more, or you got to start a little bit earlier to try and get a little bit more extra power on the ball, since you've got to hit the ball pretty much 106 miles an hour or harder to get it out in the gaps or in center field. And so that may be taking some of that pitch recognition away from some guys. I think they were in the top 10 in the league in lowest chase percentage on the road and lowest chase percentage with runners in scoring position on the road. They were in the bottom 10 in both of those stats at home. So that's something to watch for, and I do think the Rangers are trying to address it and need to address it, and the players, it's a hard thing to do when it gets inside your head. All right, so with that said, let's get on to questions. We'll just hit the questions here. Please, if you've got questions, send them in. Let's see what we've got. All right, we got Richard Jones here is asking what the latest on Nimmo's hamstring is, and I think I saw the Rangers lineup for today just a minute ago. Let me get that back up. Make sure, because Brandon indicated that he planned to play. Yeah, he's leading off and playing right tonight against Detroit. And Brandon had indicated that he did not anticipate missing the game. Now, again, look, you know, you're talking about a hamstring, and who knows? The Rangers can, at this point in time, with Wyatt Langford out, can ill afford to lose another outfielder. But as Brandon explained to the media on Wednesday after the game, he's dealt with this several times in the past 4 years. Never needed an IL stint, never needed a miss. I don't think he missed a game because of it. He explained that there's there's this level of tissue that kind of wraps the hamstring muscle called the fascia. Obviously, you've heard of plantar fasciitis, but they're in your foot. But same element here. You know, you've got this fascia that acts almost like a sleeve around the hamstring, and it's gotten irritated for Brandon on a couple of occasions. Maybe that's remnant of too early in his career hamstring strains on the right side, but he's learned how to treat it. And I've got a story in the works on Nimmo and just how detailed oriented he is in prep, but he's got a real good feel for what works for him and what doesn't, and what attention he needs to put into his prep and how he needs to tweak things when he's not feeling great. So all I can say at this point in time is he's not missing time tonight. We'll see where that goes once the game starts. Jeff Nelson, Brandon Schutz asks, happy Friday. How are you? Well, thank you, Brandon. I'm doing fine here. I've got a story on Grady Emerson that I need to knock out when we're done here. But I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well too. And looking forward to watching the Rangers this weekend, just from the comfort of my couch, and then getting to New York and seeing that big series against the Yankees, see how that plays out up there. Jeff Nelson, you asked, and Jeff, I think I answered your question, but let's get your question on the board anyway. Your prediction for a record through April was one game better than actual, yet it seems like the team has overperformed. What led to your relative optimism? Listen, I just thought that the Rangers, quite frankly, I thought the offense would come out a little bit better. I didn't anticipate Josh Young hitting the way he has, or Brandon Nimmo reaching base the way he has, but I thought some other guys would come out a little bit better than they have. Thought Corey Seager would be a little bit hotter at this point in time. Thought Josh Smith would perform a little bit better. So maybe that was where some of my optimism sat. But I feel like if anything right now, I lean a little more towards being more optimistic, because they have, whether it's 16-15 or 15-16, they've survived 3/4 of this brutal opening stretch of 40 games, right at the level that they need to, right around 500. They, providing over these next 9 days, they don't get buried with a long losing streak. They're going to be right where they need to be coming out of this period in which they had, I believe, was the hardest schedule in Major League Baseball. I know that the website that I check for strength of schedule doesn't give me a strength of schedule to this point, but it does give me a strength of schedule the rest of the way. And the Rangers have tied with Detroit for the easiest remaining schedule over the final 5 months at 472 winning percentage for their opponents. So the point was, get through those first 40 games, and you can hopefully really start to pile up some wins after that. That still remains to be seen, but I think the Rangers have met that goal for the most part so far. And I think the ideas that I talked about with some order and roles settling in the bullpen in a positive light, and the fact that we've seen what amounts to a significant change in Josh Young, I think those are all really long-term positive indicators. Other guys have got to come through, but yes. Brad Bryant on X asks, what are the chances the Rangers pick up Trout for help? They would be slim and none. The Angels aren't trading Mike Trout, and even if they do trade Mike Trout, they're not trading him to the Rangers. And even if they were willing to trade him to the Rangers don't have the equity to trade back for Mike Trout. So that's not happening. Not to mention the financial constraints this team has operated under this year. And I don't know if Ray Davis would be willing to take on another huge chunk of money for the future. So I think that's, I don't want to say nonsensical, but I just don't think it's a realistic thought. Any change in closer or catcher from medium Mike? Mike, we've been over the closer situation. I think, again, it's Jacob Latz primarily, Jacob Eunice. Also, it's Jake's. It's Jake squared. It's Jake and Shake and Jake, whatever you want to call it. But if there's a Jake in the bullpen, he's going to get late inning leverage situation. At catcher, I don't think there's really any change. I mean, I think there's been a pretty significant, I don't want to say significant. I overuse the word significant, but I think if you look at how this club has used the catchers, there's a very clear trend, I think. Danny Jansen has caught Evaldi, DeGrom, and Gore, I think, every time out. Kyle Higashioka has caught Leiter very regularly. So I think that those are kind of the definitives. I think there's been some uncertainty maybe about Gore. Jansen has caught most of Gore's starts. Higashioka has also not caught Kumar Rocker. And I think they want to pair. Danny Jansen's a better thrower, they believe, than Kyle Higashioka behind the plate, and they want to pair that up with Kumar because he's not, as we've reported often, not very quick to the plate with runners on base. They don't want to give opponents too much opportunity to steal bases. So I don't think there's going to be much change in terms of playing time at catcher. I think you're probably looking at a 60-40 or 55-45 split in terms of playing time for Jansen. I do know that Danny Jansen's gotten some heat, I think, on some of the social platforms, and because his offense has not been great to this point. I did go back and look, and Jansen's got a history of really terrible April starts when he's played regularly. The good news is he is a much better hitter in the second half of seasons than he has been in the first. I think his career OPS in March and April, or the first half of the season, I should say, was 687, and his OPS in April was lower than 687 for his career. But in the second half, he's a 783 guy. So there's almost 100 points difference in the second half of the season. And so I think that the needle trends up for him offensively. Charles wants to go down memory lane and asks about the latest on former players, McLemore, Buechele, Pudge, Kenny Rogers. Well, we had Mark McLemore on the Rangers podcast last week. Kevin Mensch was a guest this week as we revisited Kevin's 7-game home run streak, which set a major league record, or tied a major league record. I think it set a major league record for right-handed hitters at the time. Mac was a great conversation talking about the 96 team. And, you can find replays of that podcast on the YouTube channel here if you'd like to. Also, you can subscribe if you're not a subscriber to the Rangers podcast. It's Sports Day Rangers. Simple name. Search that on any podcast platform. You can download that, and you can also get our Sports Day Insider podcast with Kevin Sherrington and I, and a guest from the staff each week. Kenny Rogers has kind of distanced himself from baseball. We'd like to get him on the podcast, and some guys just don't. They do this and they put themselves out there in the public, and some guys crave more attention when they retire because they miss it. They miss that spotlight. Some guys really relish the idea of just being away from the game. I'd love to get Kenny on to talk. John Blake has reached out to him a couple of times, but we haven't been able to get him, but he's just living life. Pudge is around. I think he was at the ballpark earlier this week. Steve Buechele is around. He's just not doing much with the Rangers these days. Thought I saw him pop up somewhere, but he's just basically being Boo. The only way I can describe it. He's just not part of the broadcast anymore on the coaching staff, but everything's going well with Steve as far as I recall. Carson, what do the Rangers see in Berger. Throughout his entire career, he's had a high chase rate, whiff rate, strikeout rate, and a low walk rate. I understand he hits the ball hard, but is that all he does? Yes, Carson. In a word, that is all he does. Now, look, when he gets on a heater, he can pummel pitches. And we saw that the first couple weeks of the season. But when he goes dark, he goes into a slump, and without the ability to walk, it becomes almost a black hole in the lineup. And where do you put him? Now you're talking about taking a middle of the lineup order guy out and having to stash him somewhere. And so that, I think, that's the conundrum with Jake Berger. And I think it's the real career fork that he's facing, is to be an everyday player and a contributor long term. Jake is going to have to walk a little bit more. Nobody's asking him to go up there and look for walks, but he's going to have to figure out his nitro zones be a little bit more discriminate with them. And so if he thinks a pitch may be on the outside quarter of the plate, but it's not right in his nitro zone, maybe you do need to let that go by, because it may be off the plate. I think he had a 3% walk rate last year, and I think this year he's got a 7-to-1 strikeout to walk rate, or 5-to-1 strikeout to walk rate. Those are just not sustainable numbers for long term in the big leagues. And so I think, I wrote this earlier before the season started, but I'll rehash it. Going into the season, I think Josh Young and Jake Berger were very much in the place that Jonah Heim and Marcus Semien and Adolis Garcia were going into last year. They had come off of a bad year. They were, in their 30s. They were in either on a long-term deal or were in arbitration. And the Rangers needed to see improvement. And all three guys, were right there again with 600 OPS pluses. And there was no real offensive positive there. And I think that's why the Rangers moved on from them. Berger had an off year last year. He is in arbitration. Young is in arbitration. This is a big year for those guys. And while I've seen real progress from Josh Young, I haven't seen the same from Jake Berger to this point. Doesn't mean he can't get there. But no, I think it's a big year for Jake. No other way to say it. And you're entirely right on the chase rate, whiff rate, and the lack of a walk rate. So that's only going to play out over the course of this year. I mean, I think the Rangers are pretty much wed to Jake Berger this year at first base, but I think it's also a make or break year for him. Michael McConnell, acknowledging it is still early, how do you evaluate DeGrom and Eovaldi so far? I remain encouraged about Leiter's continued growth. Are you? How do I evaluate DeGrom and Eovaldi? What I have heard is that, and I don't have access to these metrics, but I have heard that Jacob DeGrom's pitch grades, which is a proprietary thing, grade out at the same level as Tarek Skubal to start the year as the best in the American League. The fastball's not 100 anymore, and I think we've seen a couple of occasions where Jake has left the fastball at the top of the zone or just above it at 96, and there are some hitters that can catch up to that. And that's why there have been a few home runs. But he's still got elite command with 96 to 98 miles an hour. He's got an elite slider. He is a freak in the best possible way that I can use that term. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's been something that's ebbed from his stuff a little bit as he's gotten to the age of 38 with 2 Tommy Johns in him. But I also think that he's still an elite pitcher. And quite frankly, sometimes when I see these rankings online that rank the top 5 American League pitchers or the top 5 pitchers or top 10 pitchers in baseball, I think DeGrom still belongs in that list. Maybe that's personal bias just from watching him every 5 days the last 2 years. But I mean, it's exciting when Jacob DeGrom pitches. As far as Nathan Eovaldi goes, I think I wrote a story about this yesterday too. And I think it's in the paper today. If you actually want to go pick up an actual newspaper, or you just go to the Morning News website. What Nate is a continually evolving pitcher, and what we've seen from Nathan Eovaldi this year is he has veered more and more away from the four-seam fastball. Well, his four-seam fastball has gotten hit a little bit. I think he's given up 9 home runs, 4 of them on four-seam fastballs, 3 of them on 0-0 four-seam fastballs. Perfect count to try and, just throw a strike, get ahead in the count. I think batters are geared up for that fastball. I think they're geared up feeling like, in the past, they'd get a fastball one out of every 3, or one out of every 4 pitches from Eovaldi. And so they could pick the one fastball that he's going to throw per at batter and hone in on that. I think he's picked up on that, and he has continued to move away from that four-seam fastball. And what we saw against the Yankees was he threw 10 four-seam fastballs in a 102-pitch outing, only 2 of them on first pitches. And we're seeing a guy who is now a predominantly splitter and cutter pitcher. His cutter has become his primary fastball, and he's using a sinker, which he really hadn't used much at all over the last 4 years, almost on the same level that he's using the four-seamer. So I use this in my story. He's a magician when it comes to just figuring out what to do with new pitches and adding them to his repertoire. I don't know, the numbers that I ran yesterday in terms of traditional fastballs, right? 4 and 2-seamers or 4-seamers and sinkers. Of the 93 pitchers who had thrown at least 500 pitches this year, Eovaldi's usage of the 4-seam, 2-seam mix was the lowest in all of Major League Baseball. And he's an elite pitcher who pitched 7 shutout innings against the New York Yankees. And I believe he's had 7 shutout innings in 2 of his last 3 or 2 of his last 4 starts. He said that against the A's, he had a problem with, sorry about that, little alarm here. Against the A's, the last time out, he had a little problem with the extension on the splitter, but he said that's actually a fairly easy fix for him, and he fixed it and went right back out. And I don't want to say dominated, but 7 shutout against the Yankees. It's hard to come up with much better than that. So I think both those guys are going to be just fine. I think I also go back to things that Chris Young said before the season started, and that was it was only natural to expect some regression. And don't take regression as a derogatory term from Eovaldi and DeGrom this year, only because Nathan had a 1.73 ERA last year, and Jacob had 200 plus innings, was right at 200 strikeouts, and had a Cy Young kind of season. You just don't expect that year in and year out. The idea was, and it was kind of qualified with, these guys can come back down to earth a little bit, but for the Rangers to really go where they need to go, the offense needs to pick it up significantly. And so I think we've seen not unnatural regression from those two guys. They've been fine. There have been a couple too many home runs, but I think they're on the way to fixing that. So, as far as Jack Leiter goes, the only thing I would say on Jack is we have one real year of track record to go on, but I still expect some up and down. But I do think he's really grown. I do think he look, to me, he's an established big league pitcher. I think pitching in the number 4 slot is a great place for him as he continues to grow, and I think that he will continue to tick up the ladder in terms of where he pitches in the rotation. But I think I think he's continuing to grow, and I just don't want to over evaluate him after 1 month, since there's not a long track record to evaluate him on, period. And that's kind of where I stand. Producer Joey drops in that he wants to know the best places I've eaten in Detroit, New York for the upcoming road trip. Well, I'm not going to go to Detroit, Joey. There's an Italian spot I've eaten at in downtown Detroit the last couple of years that I really like it, and I forget the name of it. But it's right. I can tell you this: it's right next to the Shinola showroom in downtown on Woodward Avenue, I believe it is, and the Shinola Hotel. It's an Italian place. I went there, and they had a great Italian brunch, so I like that place. In New York, there's too many to name, man. I go to Chinatown to get old school Chinese food at a place called Hop Key, which is straight out of a Seinfeld episode. And it's literally, you walk downstairs into a subterranean building and they only take cash. And so it makes you raise your eyebrows. But if you grew up in the 70s and 80s eating Chinese food in America, this is where it's at. And it's fantastic. So I really love it. Try and get there whenever I can. The current place that I am absolutely in love with is a place called Shuka, which is a Middle Eastern place in the East Village. Food from all over the Middle East that is spectacular. I had, what did I have there last time? I had shakshuka, which is again, a brunch thing. We went there for brunch. Eggs in a spicy tomato sauce, and they have this whipped feta with pistachios that is amazing. But everything on the menu looks and sounds fabulous. Another Middle Eastern place that I really love is a place called Mama Meza in Chelsea at around 28th Street. And of course, I can't leave New York without mentioning the deli. I'm a big fan of the Second Avenue Deli. Katz's is obviously the place that gets all the hype, but I'm more a fan of the Second Avenue Deli. Their corned beef or pastrami are just spectacular, and their waiters are more friendly. And I'm over the shtick of the waiters being rude. I'm okay with waiters being friendly. But look, if you haven't been to Katz's, you've got to go at some point in time in your life. And there are too many Italian restaurants for me to name, so I'm not going to do that right now. We're back to Charles, my guy. Charles, my man. Watching young players develop can be frustrating because of inconsistency, but I love watching the growth of Leiter and Rocker. Hanging out with Eovaldi and DeGrom has to help, right? Yeah, I don't even think you needed to make that a question, Charles. I think you could have left the right out. It's a statement of fact. I mean, and we wrote about the impact of DeGrom and Eovaldi on Leiter and Rocker and Gore and potentially the next wave of Ranger pitchers. These are two guys who approach the game differently. DeGrom, since he has this incredible set of skills, tries to make things simple. Eovaldi is such a student of the game, and he has the ability to dive deep and not overwhelm himself with information. So you've got two different guys who also work well together, who are both invested in teammates at a level that I think is pretty rare. And you've got, so if you want a simpler message, if Jack Leiter needs a simpler message that day, he can get it from Jacob DeGrom. If he wants something more complex, he can go to Nathan Eovaldi. If he wants everything, and Jack really does want everything he can get, he can go to either of them or both. And they are, you can watch games and you'll see Jack or Kamar standing between Nathan and Jacob in the dugout when, either when Rocker or Gore is pitching, or similarly Gore/Rocker when Leiter or the other is pitching. And so it's everything you want in the dynamic of veteran pitchers being mentors. And I do think that it had an impact on Leiter last year. I look for it to have an impact on Rocker this year and hopefully going forwards. Rarities. I'm going to assume this is a gold or diamond dealer, rarities. Do you think the reason Langford hasn't been signed to an extension is because of his injury history? No, I think that when the Rangers did approach Wyatt about it initially, um, there just wasn't much incentive for him on his part, I don't think, to sign. He just didn't seem all that much in a rush to sign. I think since then, um, he improved last year, but I think, look, I don't think it's wrong to expect the Rangers to think that Wyatt Langford is an 800 plus OPS player, and he's still not gotten there. So those talks have kind of cooled off a little bit. And yeah, I don't know that his injury history, I don't think is a severe thing because he's missed 20 games each of the first 2 seasons with some degree of a soft tissue injury. Is it a long-term concern that maybe there will be more serious soft tissue injuries? Yes. But I don't think his injury history so far has been traumatic, has caused him to miss significant parts of the season. So I think, yeah, everybody's aware of it, but I also think it's not necessarily something that would prevent them from signing him to a long-term deal. I think what's preventing them from signing him to a long-term deal right now is both, and I think in equal parts. I'm not going to blame one or the other, but I think they're waiting to see how interested Wyatt is in one, and they're waiting to see Wyatt, perform like the guys like Jackson Merrill and that group that have gotten long-term extensions. So, is there an update regarding Scarborough from Carson? And every time I see Scarborough, I think back to the 90s because, again, this is what we do when we get old. We just attach the name to somebody. And I always think of the extra outfielder Scarborough Green, but I know you're talking about Caden Scarborough. He had that melanoma before spring training, and it was removed before he came to spring. There was some aftercare that was involved. And I think they were giving him some additional time to heal up after he had started throwing. I don't know if he had a problem with the incision area or something like that, but I was told the last time I checked, which admittedly was probably about 10 days ago, that he would be back on a mound soon. And so I think the Rangers are probably looking at, June probably for him to be pitching. And I would expect that he goes back to Class A where he was last year to pick things up. But and I think the Rangers will be cautious with him the rest of this year and to get this chapter behind him because it was scary. And Rangers want to make sure they don't put him in a position where he then does something physical to his arm as well. So from Craig, Evan, with his ongoing struggles, has Josh Smith lost his job as starter? Well, Skip Schumacher said on Wednesday that that Josh was going to get a couple of days off. And that was the first time he's mentioned a couple of days off for anybody. Then Ezekiel Duran went out and reached base 3 times with a walk, a double, and a single and scored 2 runs. Zeke has played really well. And so I think I don't want to say that Josh has lost the job as a starter, but he's certainly given Ezekiel Duran the opportunity to take that job. And now I think Zeke is going to get several days in a row of playing time to kind of see if he can step through that door. He's going to face some right-handers here. And, Josh needs to hit against right-handers because he's probably not going to play against lefties. So if Zeke performs well against these right-handers, I mean, he did the other day against a guy making his major league debut, admittedly. If Zeke continues to perform well against a right-hander, I think he's going to get more playing time. I think right now it's very much a meritocracy, and it's going to be playing time is earned. Right now, Ezekiel Duran is earning playing time. Still plenty of chance for Josh to get more playing time, but right now I think Zeke has kind of the upper hand. Carson goes back to the Langford question. asking if there was a team-friendly guaranteed amount of money as well as a health performance incentives. Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see a guy doing a really team-friendly deal for a first contract. I think that it would be team-friendly, but it would be a legitimate amount guaranteed. I think what you're indicating is would a guy take a lower amount with some PB's performance bonuses involved, and I don't really see that. I mean, maybe some performance bonuses over the stuff that that Merrill and those guys got shortly after they came up, but I think that Wyatt probably views himself in that class at least in terms of guaranteed money. Rarities, whose questions are not rarities today. Yes, dad joke. I make myself so happy when I make you all groan. When do you think they'll bring up Spores or Alexi Diaz to the bullpen? Alexis has pitched really well down there, and I think that if they need an arm, he might be the next guy. I have not looked at the box scores in the last couple of days, but I know he was pitching really, really well. And the strikeout to walk rate had been something that the Rangers were really happy with. As Josh Spores, he tried to pitch on back-to-back days, and that was supposed to be the final test to determine if he was ready. That happened about 10 days ago. It did not go well. Josh really had a drop in velocity the second time out, was hit pretty hard. And so I think the Rangers are still of the belief that the velocity overall is not there where they want it to be. They want it to be a tick higher and more consistent. He doesn't have an out in his contract again until the middle of June, so I don't think there's any reason to fast play him. The issue would be, outside of Alexis Diaz, what options do the Rangers have if they have another bullpen injury? And that's something to be considered. But I don't think that to this point the Rangers feel that Josh is ready to be in a high leverage situation in the bullpen. And in all likelihood, if they need somebody in the bullpen, it's going to be somebody that they want to pitch for multiple innings or available to pitch for multiple innings. I don't think they view Josh in that way. And for that regard, probably not Alexis Diaz, but if in a worst case situation, maybe you use Alexis Diaz in a medium leverage situation, something like that. Another question from you: what do you think Cody Freeman's likely position to be for the Rangers if and when he returns to the team? Look, I think Cody's getting closer. I think sometime this month he'll be ready. I think his position likely, is going to be determined by other factors. I don't think Cody controls his position per se. But I thought he would be in the mix for the second base job. And I think if he had been healthy, he'd be in the mix for the second base job. I thought he would have been an option at third base if Josh Young had struggled. So I think you look at second base right now, and certainly Cody could fit into that mix there if Duran doesn't grab the position as an everyday player. And if Smith doesn't, really rebound against right-handers, I think all of a sudden you're looking at, when Cody's ready, how much playing time does he get? The Rangers really love the energy that Cody brings. They love his presence in the dugout. And he just has a knack for making things happen. So I think he comes in as a utility guy who could spell at second base, spell at third, maybe even in the outfield. He's not really a shortstop. But, I would think that as the season goes on, and if Zeke hasn't made a long-term significant turn for the better, if he ends up being more like the guy he's been the last 2 years, I think the Rangers will then look to give the next guy up opportunities, and that is probably Cody. Although I do have to point out that Justin Foscue has really hit the ball well at AAA again to start this year. Strikeout to walk rate is great. That's an important factor for the Rangers. And certainly at some point in time, if second base continues to be an issue for the Rangers, other guys are going to get those opportunities. That's basically where we're at right now is, whoever seizes it is going to get the opportunity until they let it slip through their hands. Ben, I'm not going to answer your question just because I think I answered it. But thank you for the question and thank you for the comment. You asked about Josh Smith and the leash that he has at second base. We just kind of went over that, I think, pretty in depth. And I think basically he's out of leash right now. I think it's in Ezekiel Duran's hands for the time being. With Josh's next chance, depending on when Duran cools off, or when there's an injury, or when there's just an off day needed for somebody at some position. And I also want to just add on this whole thing. Look, I don't want to take anything away from what Zeke Duran has done in his playing time this year. It's been a much better start than he's had. But listen, at no point in time has he ever seized a position given the opportunity. Now, maybe the opportunity is going to be a little bit greater this year, and maybe he'll do more with it. But I don't think that second base is settled by any stretch of the imagination. I think my ring light keeps getting in my eyes, and I look like I have. Look at that! Look at me! I look like a freak. I also look like a freak even when it's not in my eyes, but be that as it may. Anyway, so I think that Zeke's going to get the opportunity, but I think he's only going to keep it as long as he keeps producing. And finally, Rarities asks, do you miss Nate Lowe on this team? He looks to be doing well in Cincy. I'm really happy for Nate. I think he's got 6 home runs this year. He's really done well with the Reds. Nate's a guy I was really fond of. Obviously, I was really moved by the story of his mom, who passed away this year. And I wish nothing but the best for him. He was a guy that I really enjoyed dealing with for his time in Texas. Glad he won a World Series here. Glad he's having success now. So that's about it, everybody. I think I got to the end of the questions, and 48. We may have set a record today. We may have gone longer than ever because we're at 2:48. Hopefully you made it to the end of this. I really appreciate if you did. If you are just watching a small snippet here at the end, thanks again. Remember, please subscribe to the channel. I'd like to show the bosses just how much we're gaining momentum here with these chats. Please put any comments you've got under the video in the comment section there. And I will be back at some point in time next week, maybe a little bit sketchy on when I can do it because I'm in New York Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I've got a game here on Friday against the Cubs. But if we don't get one next week, we'll get one in the early part of the week following. So you won't go more than 8 or 9 days without me. I know that for a lot of you, that's not really something you look forward to, but we'll survive, people. So again, subscribe to the channel, follow me if you're not on Twitter. You can always subscribe to the Dallas Morning News or dallasnews.com. We've got some 25-cent specials running right now. Click on one of my stories and subscribe for a period for just 25 cents and determine if we're a good investment for you. And I think we are. And until next week or the week after, see everybody. Thanks for joining us.